This thing that I have found is what I would call my gracious space. Hi folks, my name is Jack Carlisle with Gracious Spaces, and we are high atop Old Town Orange in Orange, California. We have an amazing guest today, beautiful, talented. I could go on and on what this wonderful woman is about. Erika Kotite, welcome to Gracious Spaces. How are you this morning?
Thank you, Jack. I'm doing great.
Well, you know, we could sit here and talk about all the amazing things. You're a writer, you're an accomplished designer, you've a family. What is it you don't do? We could sit here all day, but you know what? We're going to save that for another show because there's this other woman in your life that I want to talk about. And we're going to go way back in the day, Victorian area, if you will. And this other woman's name is?
Jane Austen.
Jane Austen.
That's right.
Give us, so for those who fell asleep in high school and didn't listen to their teacher, give us a brief description of who Jane Austen is.
Jane Austen was a British novelist. She lived in the Regency period, just prior to Queen Victoria. Born in 1775, only lived to age 42, but she managed to write 6 of the greatest novels in the universe. And I guess I am biased, but there are thousands of others who agree with me. Yeah. And she just lived a very secluded life in the English countryside. Her father was a clergyman. She had a gazillion brothers and sisters, some of whom went on to great fame in their time. But Jane Austen was by far the most famous of her family. And she wrote incredible works that people join groups for to discuss and do book clubs on, and you know, do little caricatures of her. I mean, she is just alive and well, even though she died 250 years ago.
But was, as you mentioned, sort of a recluse. She liked being by herself, I think.
She was, both by design and by necessity, very isolated. And women, of course, back then, she was not married, never married. Women back then were pretty much stay-at-homes, so they didn't get out and about too much. So yes, but she also liked her solitude. She also liked sitting back and observing people, and that is how she was able to write those incredible books that showed so much about human nature.
Well, I think out of those the 6, Pride and Prejudice is the one that comes to my mind immediately. And I believe I read somewhere over a 200-year period, like 20 million copies of that book have been sold over that period.
I wouldn't be surprised. And it's funny because the book went through peaks and valleys of popularity. She, the first couple of novels didn't have her name on them when she published them. And so there's a little bit of a secrecy on who wrote them. She died in obscurity. Her copyrights expired, and her family was very protective of her. And it wasn't until probably, I think, 60 or 70 years later that one of her brothers wrote a biography about our dear Aunt Jane, or our dear Jane. And it was very much a, prim and proper old maid, basically, who lived a very quiet life. He didn't really do her justice. Yeah. At any rate, somehow she was rediscovered over and over again. But there were times where no one really read Jane Austen.
So that was his perception of her, right? I wonder if he even really knew her that well or spent time with her to have that judgment on her and how she really lived her life.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was a couple of things he wanted. At that time, you wanted to portray women who were unmarried and, older to be very staid and unremarkable, if you will. He also maybe saw another side to her that wasn't the woman that she put into the writing of her novels. So maybe she was calm and placid. Yeah. We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
But we do know she lived her life the way she wanted to live. And what I find interesting is in that period of history, you wrote under different names. If a female author was there, she wrote under a man's name, and she chose not to even go that rate. I think they dubbed her, or she signed some of them by a lady.
Yes, that's right.
It sounds like she wanted to stir the pot a little bit there. She's kind of a feisty lady, I would think,
she
too.
was feisty. You should read some of her letters.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! I mean, she's a crack up.
Yeah.
And some of her, insults and double entendres and everything still resonate today.
Yeah.
I mean, she's hilarious. And a lot of today's directors and screenwriters, they get it. Yeah. And that's why some of the adaptations based on her books have been so well received.
Yeah. So where would one go if they wanted to read these letters? I mean, we have online now that you can push of a button, you find any information, but I picture them very well kept in like the British Museum of Art, or these archival tunnels.
I think some of her letters are at the British Museum. They're scattered around. I mean, I don't think they're under one owner, but you definitely starting with the British Museum is a good place. And there are also some published collections that are beautiful and do show examples of her actual, wonderful 19th, 18th century script.
Well, it was said too, if you go through some of them, her grammar is not that great in some of them, and there's misspelling and poor punctuation. And
that's true.
I find that sort of charming and quirky. Just because you're a writer, who is to tell you have to be perfect?
Yeah, she played a little fast and loose with some of her spellings. I don't know if it was of haste or just I don't really care. I'm getting my thought out.
Because she was well educated.
Very well, well educated. Yeah. But just
maybe it was sort of like a stick it to them. I don't really care.
Then it wasn't. You could kind of do what you want. I don't think it was as horrific if a typo made it into a letter or a book. So I think she had it easier.
Well, I think if I was going to go and search these pages or any of her writings out, I would want it to be in somewhere romantic. I wouldn't want to sit here and Google in a room. I would want to go there and be in a cave or a library with books and ladders and stuff everywhere just to get the full experience. And so you've kind of done that. There's a group, right? A Jane Austen, probably many, I would guess, but is there a main Jane Austen fan club?
Oh,
if
yeah.
you will? Yeah.
It is a very large fan club. It's called the Jane Austen Society of North America, JASNA for short. And JASNA was born from the Jane Austen Society of the UK. They were the grandma, if you will. Yeah. And it was quite a pedigree of even Jane Austen's ancestors who are part of the origination of both the Jane Austen Society in England and JASNA in North America, because Joan Austen Leigh, it's a great, 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 great niece, lived in Canada, and she was one of the founding members of JASNA.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, and she died a little while ago, but I did, in my tenure with JASNA, I did actually get to lay eyes on a real bona fide Jane Austen ancestor.
Oh my gosh. I think Jane would really be hyped about that she got approval from her ancestral's family, right? That's huge. I mean,
oh yeah,
to do that.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
Does she herself write?
She did do some writing, and I couldn't tell you any of the titles, but she definitely was steeped in her family's history, and not sure if it was fiction or nonfiction, but I think she did some biographical work on Jane Austen, yes. And she was very involved in JASNA, did a lot of talks, and helped with getting us permission to get exhibits open to us and that sort of thing.
A little sort of quirky fact, I believe it was Kelly Clarkson, someone in the music world, tried to buy a ring or something that was Jane Austen's, and the British Prime Minister of Museums or whatever stepped in and said it's not leaving the country, so good luck. And I think she finally gave up on trying to acquire that ring over a couple of years period. So it seems like they're holding very tight to their heritage and what Jane left for the world.
It does seem that way. Things are still spread all over the place, but it stands to reason that the UK would definitely want to hang on to
Sure.
as much as it could. And it scattered again when Jane Austen's name was really not that well known. I think the biggest thing that comes around, of course, are first editions and even manuscripts, although to my knowledge, I don't think there are any handwritten manuscripts, lying around. I could be wrong, but it's mostly her early works, and the first editions are just treasures. And the UK, I believe, has a vast majority of the items from Jane Austen.
Was there a period that she got to see a little bit of her fame?
No.
No, it's all after. Wow.
The Prince Regent commented on, oh goodness, I want to say, I don't remember which book it is, but he wanted her to he sent her a letter saying how much he enjoyed the book. So he knew it was her. And she didn't care for the Prince Regent all that much. He was a bit of a, I don't know, not a savory character, even though he was royalty, but, it was a prince. So she said, thank you.
Very politely,
And I think with the last few of her novels that were published before her death, I believe had her name on them. But again, small world back then.
Yeah.
No socially, obviously no way to publicize someone, like there is today. So she didn't catch fire until probably the Victorian era. Yeah.
Any works left unfinished?
Yeah. Let's see. The unfinished works are the Sanditon's, which was Sanditon, excuse me, which was made into a limited series and I think is still on. And then the Watsons was unfinished, and Lady Susan.
Okay.
So popular, but the six are really where it's at, in my opinion. Yeah.
The unfinished works, you've read them? I would imagine.
I read Sanditon, and it is funny because you're just left. She ended it very quickly. It's funny, the Sanditon series, I think they got through something like all of the written part that she actually wrote, I think was covered in half of the first episode.
Okay.
Everything else they had to write themselves. Yeah. So, but her genius is such that she gave the characters and gave enough of an essence of the characters that they were able to develop a limited series out of just, I think she finished maybe, 50 pages.
Was there a common theme throughout her books of these characters as far as families from the English countryside or families that were more well-to-do versus in the lower class?
The families, the overriding theme, if I had to pick one, is marriage and the necessity of young women to find someone who would be able to give them financial security for the rest of their lives. Marriage back then was very different. This is more the probably middle to lower upper classes that Jane Austen wrote about. Okay. And so the women might have had a small dowry, but not enough. Their overriding goal was to marry well and marry above their station if possible. Elizabeth Bennet, the famous heroine of Pride and Prejudice, was sought after by Fitzwilliam Darcy, who was several steps above her in terms of wealth, but Elizabeth Bennet was still a gentleman's daughter. There's a really fine definition of class, who you could marry, who you couldn't marry.
So planned, probably.
Yeah. The intricacies of that was a huge part of the fabric. But I would say the thing that makes these novels so great would be the comedic observations of silly people, nasty people, almost hilariously selfish people. I mean, there's one scene where a young man is trying to leave his sister something after their father died, and his wife kept whittling down what he was planning to give them until she said, well, it's probably better that they should give you something.
Just to get that little dig in.
Yeah. I mean, just, so many scenes like that I've read these books each probably 30 times, and I still laugh.
And so what makes you, do you have to be in a certain mood or to like want to pick that book up and read it again. You're just so enamored with it, and you could probably memorize page by page. But does something trigger you to go back and revisit a novel?
One of the things that triggers me is the annual general meetings that we have with JASNA. They will be based on a certain theme. Sometimes it's a broader theme, and sometimes it's an actual book. And so every year when it's a single book, it gives me an excuse to say, well, I have to read Persuasion again, because that's the theme of this year's AGM.
Right.
And so that's a no-brainer.
Okay.
The books were very comforting to me during, believe it or not, during delivery. I have 3 children, and during my first delivery, my mother would read Pride and Prejudice and help me distract myself from the immense pain that was going on. I think because Austen wrote, it was the Age of Enlightenment, and it was very classical and symmetrical and clean.
Yeah.
Her prose just was, for some reason, exciting and calming at the same time. And so I read when I'm sad, when I'm this world that we live in now is so fraught with things that you sometimes think, oh, if I need to stop thinking about that for a while.
Yeah.
And you go back to something that you know is going to be just so bracing.
Yeah. I love that I'm picturing your mom as like your own personal audio book voice sitting beside you reading.
It was wonderful. And she actually had an absolutely beautiful voice. And so I remember that. So sometimes, she died a year and a half ago. Sometimes I pick up Pride and Prejudice because all of these books have distinct memories for me as well.
And how often, you mentioned a year, JASNA meets once a year?
The AGM, the JASNA annual general meeting is usually in October or early November. And I've been very involved. I think I joined, it's been 32 years. So I've gone to maybe 17 or 18 AGMs during that time.
And so they're probably held somewhere abroad, right?
They're held always in North America.
Okay.
We take turns with Canada. We've
nice of you guys.
Here in Southern California, we've scratched and clawed our way to convince all the East Coast members to come to Huntington Beach and Los Angeles twice. And we've had one in San Francisco. We go to all the great major cities, Chicago. Our next year is in Cleveland. We've had several in New York, Washington, D.C., and then in Canada, Ottawa, Montreal, Victoria, of course.
Yes.
Just it's an excuse to travel. This last recent one was in Denver.
Okay. And your involvement, you touched a little bit on it, but back when your first meeting, what drew you? Did a friend sort of say, "Hey, I'm going to tag along"? What kind of connected you with that group?
I was a reporter at Entrepreneur Magazine, and there was a copy editor there who somehow got wind of the fact that I read these books over and over. And most of my colleagues just teased me about it, like, Erika, get a life. But Leanne said, oh, there's a group, right? I mean, this was, 1990.
And you were like a group.
And I said, oh, really? No, I didn't.
There's more people like me.
Yeah, my tribe.
Right.
So I looked it up, and sure enough, there was this, even at the time, quite large group. So I joined, and then they have local regional regions that you can join so that you can have better access to events. So I'm part of the Southwest region and very involved with that as well. And anyway, my first AGM was in Washington, D.C., and I just went by myself, didn't know a soul. But my roommate happened to be a bourbon drinker. And I thought, oh, my word, I love this woman. She drinks her bourbon neat. I like these Jane Austen peeps. So I felt right at home. Not that I'm a bourbon drinker, but it looked good.
It fits the bill, doesn't it?
Yeah, she wasn't afraid. And it's not just tea, man. It's whiskey in a teacup.
So I'm picturing you're with your tribe, just everyone sort of dressed the part as well.
Well, there is cosplay.
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
and it's a magnificent sight to see. Some of these women can make masterful costumes, Bridgerton level, pelisses and jackets and bonnets with feathers and empire, waist gowns out of silk, just glorious. Now you have the costume wearers and you have those who go more for academic reasons. It's a highly prestigious organization, even for professors at Princeton and UCLA and Northwestern. These are published, tenured professors who vie to get a speaking engagement because it's not easy. We have a lot of requests for the opportunity to do our breakout sessions, our plenary talks, and our special events. Yeah. And so we're able to really pick and choose from the best. So you have those who come for fun, those who come for scholarly gratification, and then those who come for both. I've worn costumes a couple times, but I mostly come for the talks.
Yeah. Have you yourself ever spoken at one?
I have spoken at a regional event on, my business is making backyard studios for women. And I did a little talk on how some of the characters in Jane Austen's novels, trying to escape their sort of dreary husbands, would create a space actually in their home that they knew their husband wouldn't want to go to very much. And that really, in essence, was their little she shed.
Oh, very clever of them, right?
Yeah, very, very smart. I thought this has been going on a long time. Yeah. But I am the chair of the Young Filmmakers Contest for JASNA. We are trying to get younger folks interested in Jane Austen, and not just reading her books, but in the visual qualities of the characters and the themes that she poses.
Okay.
And so I've been the chair of that contest since 2017. We get amazing judges to take part, and it's growing really, really well. I'm very excited about it.
So if someone wanted to submit something to that, how would they go about doing that?
They would just go to jasna.org and then find the Young Filmmakers Contest. The films are 5 minutes and under. They can be filmed on a phone or any kind of camera. And be accepted, and they just have to be really funny and really good. And we've had some really great submissions, some animated shorts. Some people base their film not on the books, but on the adaptations of the books, and that's totally fine too. We want the door to be open to the genius of this woman to be continued through the ages. And the Young Filmmakers Contest, I think, is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah. What gravitated you toward that? I'm sure there's other avenues or parts of the organization you could take a lead in and go for. What made you go to the film aspect of it?
Well, I'm a hobbyist filmmaker. I'm very, very much a novice, but I enjoy putting videos together. I just use iMovie. I mean, I'm, this setup just like,
More than I know. iMovie, it's a thing, I guess.
But it's so wonderful how easy it is for even amateurs to make, fun films. Yeah. And I thought, wow, I would love to learn more and offer more to people. And I know that the next generation of membership is going to come from the visual arts. And honestly, a lot of our members are over 60, and you need to look at that. Yeah. And the excitement really is in, not as many people read novels cover to cover as they used to. And we just have to be realistic about that. Yeah. And just because that's the only medium that Jane Austen had doesn't mean she wouldn't be thrilled to see the visual aspect of her books coming to life. And so that's what made me excited about taking this on.
So Jane Austen herself, I wonder, you were talking about, we just spoke on the maybe a younger generation coming up, and did she herself, I wonder, put herself into some of her books, her personality, I wonder? Kind of incorporate herself in there somehow, or make a character sort of mold one based on herself? That's
a great question. We know that she used names and certain personality characteristics of her family and people that she knew. Again, through her letters, scholars were able to glean really interesting tidbits about, that's where Mr. Collins came from. As far as Jane herself, no one
Who
really knows.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just very little except again for her letters. And she was the omniscient, narrator. It's difficult to see whether she flipped herself into one of the characters and became the one on whom the narrator is narrating. Do you know what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure she did that. I think she looked outward
Yeah.
and looked for good points and bad points of the people she knew around her, and then blew them up deliciously so that they made these unforgettable characters.
Yeah. Yeah, because we only know what others have written about her. She wasn't one to sit and talk about herself.
No. And
And so,
the tragedy that we all talk about all the time is that Cassandra, her beloved sister, when Austen died, she burned probably 3/4 of her letters.
oh my,
So there probably was really good stuff in there.
yeah.
Stuff that Cassandra didn't want the targets to see.
So there was some motivation behind it to
Yeah.
kind of cover up.
Exactly. And even the things that survive, she had a sharp tongue.
Yeah.
And so there might have been more revelations about Austen in those letters, but they're gone forever, so we don't know.
So as we move forward, where do you see yourself growing with this group? I mean, it sounds like you've been very involved and you're keeping yourself busy with it and helping where you can. You've got great thoughts on how to do that. What would be your next step with that group? Anything that you feel like you'd like to bring forward?
I just got finished serving as the VP of publications. So I was doing that for 4 years, and that was through most of COVID. And it was a really fulfilling job. It's publishing our scholarly book once a year and also overseeing the quarterly newsletter. Very, very busy job, volunteer job,
Yeah.
and took a lot of hours. And so in 2022, when that ended, I was eager to get my life back a little bit. I had given a lot of my heart and soul during that time period. And it was a very difficult time period for us as a group. We couldn't meet in person. We had to put our AGM on Zoom, and we did an amazing job, but it exhausted all of us. So I think all of us are in recovery mode right now, but we're also very joyous that we can meet again in person. Yeah. I think I'm going to really focus on the Young Filmmakers Contest and try to take a step back on the other things. And then next AGM, I'm going to be missing because, and this is very much related to this
Yes,
interview, because it's the 30th anniversary of my husband's and my marriage. But the year before that was the year he proposed at an AGM
Oh, word. Okay.
in Lake Louise, Calgary. And he dressed up as Fitzwilliam Darcy to do so.
So, you must have been
It was incredible.
over the moon.
So I'm skipping the AGM so that we can go back to Lake Louise and get a room at the place where it all began
And recreate
and
that.
walk around that amazing glacier lake. And I haven't been there in 30 years, and so I've been dying to go back, and this is our chance to do it. So I'm very
I
excited.
get goosebumps.
Yeah, it's
So did he step forward with that because he knew that was something very important to you, or is he kind of a little bit of a geek himself about Jane Austen?
It was all the former.
Yeah.
I think if he had read anything at all, it might have been Pride and Prejudice, but he was not a Jane Austen reader. He knew I was. We had gone out for 3 years. We had broken up and then just gotten back together again because I wasn't sure I wanted to get married. And so he had planned this for a long time. He was going to fly up in secret, get a costume, get down on one knee and propose.
Like where do you pick up the phone? Hey, I need I need a certain type of costume.
I think he went to because this is SoCal. There's a huge costume company in LA. I think it's called Western Costume Supply. I mean, anyway, he went to some big costume place. They had just the thing. He snuck up there and asked the bellboy to find me. And he was supposed to be down in Texas at a business meeting, and he hid out in 6-degree weather outside the mezzanine until the bellboy found me and said I had a phone call in the mezzanine. So I picked up the phone, and there was no one on the other line, and this was pre-cell phone, obviously. Yeah. And then Tim walked in the mezzanine and got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. It's just like shocking. So I didn't say yes right away.
Oh, Erika.
It was too much of a surprise. I wasn't ready.
You're like, what is happening here?
No.
It probably felt so surreal.
It was surreal, and I was just beside
Poor
myself.
Tim.
I hung on to the ring, but I said, I don't know. And then I was like, what am I going to do with you? You're not a member, He says, well, I said, well, here, sit here. So I sat him in a bar.
You were very concerned with the logistics of it all.
I was just, kind of beside myself. And so he sat in this bar with a bunch of burly Canadian dudes watching the hockey game in costume. And he doesn't drink beer, so he got a glass of white wine. So
there he is.
Sore thumb sticking out. Anyway, I walked back into the room and somehow word got around. I told my mom who was with me, and she was just, oh my goodness, Tim's here. Go get him. So I went to get him, and of course he's in costume, and all the women are swooning because he's, we're in our early 30s.
Like, where did this Prince Charming come from?
Yeah, looking good. So he's promenading around with all the costume Janeites, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, about a month or so later, I said, does your offer still stand? And he said, yes, it does. And so we've been married ever since.
And now I love that you're going back to recreate that.
That's right.
As such. Well, I think it's fair to say, Erika, it's what we're about here. And a gracious space doesn't have to be a physical box or room or building. Is it fair to say that's your gracious space? Is this connection you found with this amazing author?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When the AGMs, they're expensive, they're hard to get to, they're hard to fit into your busy schedule. I have my own business and I've been working all my life, but when I get there and I hear all this amazing information and inspiration and comedy and conversation all around this amazing author, it's hard to describe. I come back in 3 days, and for months, I'm fed.
Wow.
And so it is an interior space inside my head, but it's also a place created by all of the members of JASNA who make it possible for us all to experience a world like this, and also to Jane Austen, who started it all.
It's just this companionship, this commonality you have with this person.
Yes.
You yourself are carrying that through. So I love that you want to continue that with the youth.
Yes, I do. And, there were a couple of times some of the winners in past years in the Young Filmmakers Contest, they had sheepishly admitted that, I was on my syllabus. I picked something else. Oh, I've never read her. But then they, whipped through one of the books or saw one of the movie adaptations and thought, oh my gosh, she's really funny. Really, 250 years. I can't believe she lived so long ago. Yeah. She is just a stunning example of timelessness. Yeah. And I know that will continue, and I'm doing my small part to help that continue.
Well, I think it's a big part, Erika. I think that's huge. So where does one go to join this group or find out more?
Well, if you can remember JASNA, it stands for the Jane Austen Society of North America. Okay. You go to jasna.org. We have an amazing website. It will tell you what region you can join. It will show you all of the events we've had in the past. It will describe all the annual general meetings and which ones are coming up. It's just a real treasure trove of information, and very, very much au courant, modern, and user-friendly. And so we're really proud of that. And I think anyone who is intrigued by this conversation you and I have had will find some really interesting things in there. And I hope that some of you out there will join us. Yeah. It's just incredible.
I highly think they will. And I can speak for both of us. I think if you're not familiar with Jane Austen, go out. We are challenging you to pick up a book and read one of them, and you'll be hooked for sure. Yeah. All of this dynamic woman had to offer the world. So.
Absolutely.
Well, gosh, I really appreciate your time that you've taken to be with us here today. And we're going to have you back.
So I can't wait.
Thank you, Erika,
Thank you,
for
Jack.
your time. See you later, folks.
All right.